We're recording already?
Yeah, it is recording.
Oh, okay.
Is it? Oh yeah, it is.
It's happening. Oh, you're doing the intro. You're doing everything this time. I'm just gonna answer your question.
I gotta read it. Ready when you are.
I'm ready. Oh, I gotta drive. There's like a lot
Yeah,
of...
you gotta get your mind
There's
up.
a lot of situations
I know.
happening
This is not my car.
in the middle.
Here we go. Welcome to UNSAID.
Ooh.
It's a space for the conversations we never had, which is pretty true.
Yeah,
right?
accurate.
And this is episode 2, and today we're continuing a conversation called Holy God. That's not what it's called.
Called Ilse doesn't know how to drive.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Called Wrestling with Offense Part 2. This is Ilse's story. And if you joined us last episode, we were talking about my story, Wrestling with Offense Part 1, Wrestling with my story. And talking about a little bit, again, this was, I would say on the surface, on the surface I mean like more is going to unfold as we continue these conversations. You don't want to throw out all your nuggets out at once.
Right.
So it's going to continue. This conversation is going to continue.
Yeah.
But today we're talking about wrestling with offense, specifically offense towards God.
Yes.
Because in my episode, it was offense towards leadership in the places that I was found, specifically the church, but in places that I was found, and not knowing how to respond right towards leadership. But your story is interesting because you are in the midst of, from the birth of the church to today, literally. Yep. And you know everything, you see everything. Well, maybe not know everything, but you see everything.
I'm not Jesus, but yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
But and for the most part, the head of the leadership or the pastors are your parents as well.
Good times.
Right? And so it is good times. I'm sure it is. And again, I'm Gus.
I'm Ilse.
And we're going to talk about offense towards God.
Yes.
Okay, I want to talk about this because it's easy for me to say I'm offended towards people because they hurt me. What do you mean? Because I've heard people say it, and when they're sharing it, it makes sense. But what do you mean by you were offended with God? With God.
Well, Gus, I'm just kidding. I think what I mean by that is I had, just as we talked about in the leadership episode, like you had expectations about leadership that weren't met, that led to disappointment, which kind of led to offense. I had expectations about God that weren't met, and that led me to become really angry with him, because I think in part it's what I believed about the gospel. Like I believed that if like I don't know who or where, when it happened, but somehow in my mind I believed that if I lived a good enough life, God like guaranteed good results. It was kind of like a money back guarantee. Like if you like do it, you will have success, you will have like all the things, like you'll never suffer. And like I wouldn't want to admit that because I really thought that like I had a really good understanding of the Bible and Jesus and things. But when actual suffering came into my life, and it felt like God was blessing everybody else was getting grace, everybody else was getting mercy, and I wasn't, I was really offended with God because I felt like everybody else, he was good to everybody else and not to me. Right. It was like kind of a comparison thing where it, like for example, if a friend and I were both in a relationship, she would get married and I would be betrayed. Like that kind of thing. Where it was like, what the heck? Like, we both follow the same Jesus. I'm a better Christian than her. Right. And yet, like, in my opinion.
Because you're a PK, you're like...
Yeah, I'm a super Christian. I've got like all the Girl Scout cookies and all the seals, all the stamps of like the best Christianity ever. But you're telling me that her in her brokenness has more than me in my supposed super holiness, right? Right. So that caused me to become offended with God and to think that somehow he was only good to others and not to me. Right. Yeah. So I think one of the things I mentioned in my conversation was about how offense was unfair.
right? In the sense of like the expectations I hold against someone.
Yeah.
So you were holding expectations against God that you brought up. Now, and I think you tried to figure out right now where it came from, but do you think it was because of like what your parents as pastors were preaching, or what you read and you thought this was it, or things that does that make sense? Where does this idea of God owes me because I'm doing A, B, and C? Like, I
think it was the stories that I heard. Because
so people's testimony.
Kind of, yeah, like, because we have a tendency in church, I think, and this is like very specific to marriage conversations, where like we will hear a story that's kind of really, really like, and they lived happily ever after. So it's like, and she never dated anyone, and they never kissed, and like they never looked at each other in some type of like, like dirty way. And because of that, now their marriage is amazing and everything is beautiful and blah blah blah. And like growing up, this like that purity message was like so drilled into me, not just at church, but even like I went to a Christian school. So then like it was like at Christian school it was like, and if you wear a mini skirt, you're like not helping your brothers that are like, in Christ, and like you're causing temptation for them. Like, who do you think you are? And so it was like all these things of like fine. I don't care about my fashion choices. I don't really care about dating. I just want to like, I'm gonna pursue purity because I know that like the pure in heart see God, and I know that the pure in heart also earn good marriages, because I heard all of these stories of like people who waited or people who did it right and like were successful.
All right, so what I hear you saying is, and I'm gonna put it in my words, to maybe hopefully help somebody out there listening, is if there was a mold, you were it. Like, you fit the mold. You fit the if this is what you would want in a Christian girl, boom,
all there.
Ilse, this is how you would expect her to dress, boom. This is how you wanted to talk, boom. Like, this is how you wanted to share or preach or share her testimony, like, boom. Like, so in a mold, so to speak. You were like the mold, like you were the model in that sense, like what to aim for. And you set yourself up there, and like, I am doing everything that everybody around me says I should be doing. Therefore, my story should end up like that.
Because that's how we teach, right? Like, I mean, that's how I felt like it was taught. Like, don't do that because then you have consequences. Live this way because then God's gonna bless you. Like, that's like in youth ministry, like you tell kids like, don't have sex, you're gonna get an STD and a broken heart, and like there's no condom that will protect you from a broken heart, right? Like that kind of thing. Like, and so it's like, fine, like I won't live with that. Like, fine, like I won't do that because there's consequences, but also you're telling me that Jesus is worth it because he offers better things.
Yes.
Right? Like there is something about Jesus that means that I get something better than what's in the world. And so I did all the things. I read my Bible, I did my devotional, I came to the house of prayer at 6 a.m. Like I did all the things, right? And so then things didn't work out. Like it just didn't like unfold in the magical, like, cool story testimony that I could tell when I was preaching to like encourage people to live that way. Like I don't have that story. Like everything kind of fell apart and it was a mess.
So for those of you listening and watching this, like, this is a real-time conversation because we haven't had this conversation.
We have not.
You've heard my story here and there from me and maybe my wife. But I haven't really had this conversation with you. So I have a question that might help me in my mind, like place this somewhere. Because for the most part, I was involved in your life in many areas with my wife, and in some very pivotal moments in your life, Gus and Shirley were my youth pastors. So like, you guys were like there. You saw a lot of this happen. So I can place this somewhere in my mind. Specifically, when did you see all this come to light? Like what year or month in that year, and so on. So
it was recent, like really recent.
Like a year or two, like or a month.
2 years ago.
Last week.
Like, okay, so I think I saw
2 years ago. Okay.
Parts of it happen, like come to light over the course of my life. Like, because I think when I was like 18 and I went off to college, I was super self-righteous. whatever,
Right.
right? And then I remember that I had to write
because
a paper.
the people around you weren't.
Right. And I had to write this paper in one of my, like, because I went again to a Christian school, so, and I had to write about like my relationship with Jesus in this paper. And I remember that and we're done. And I'm just kidding. So in this paper, I like I wrote. It had to do like write a reflection about your relationship with Jesus. How have you, like, you know, whatever. And I wrote like, I love Jesus, and I really feel like Jesus loves me, and I feel like people in the school really haven't experienced Jesus the way that I've experienced Jesus. And like,
you said these things.
I said these things. I wrote these things in a paper for a class. And so
we gotta read that here.
I don't even know where the paper is. But so I was like so proud of myself. I was like, this is the best paper ever. My professor is gonna think I'm amazing. Like, this is awesome. And I submitted this paper, right? And my professor was like the professor equivalent of Santa Claus. Like, he was like the jolliest, sweetest man. Like, if you got something wrong in class, he really wouldn't call you out. He'd just be like, wow, that's a really good try. Like, you know? And so I like thought, I was like, easy, he's gonna love me.
We cut off. I didn't check where it cut off.
That's okay. I think.
But
I was
you were telling your story about your
paper.
jolly Santa Claus teacher.
My jolly Santa Claus professor told me that I was judgmental.
Because you wrote a paper.
Because I wrote a paper about how I love Jesus more than everyone else.
And the people at your school don't.
And
it
the
was a
people
Christian
in my school, yeah. Because in a Christian school, you realize that there's a lot of different kinds of people who call themselves Christian.
Right.
And even teachers. And I really thought I was better than them, or I thought that I knew Jesus better than them, because I had been, you know, in the house of prayer. I had had these really awesome encounters with Jesus.
Yeah.
And I didn't hear that as much from my classmates. Like, it was different, and so I just assumed that I was better.
Right.
And so my professor called me out in the comment section. My jolly Santa Claus professor told me that I was judgmental. And I lost it. And then, to top it all off, after that class, so that class was early in the morning, and right after that class, I had to go to chapel, which is like the school's like service. You know,
was this during your first 4 years?
It was during literally my first semester of college, my freshman year of college. Yeah.
Okay. That helps make sense.
Yeah. It was my freshman
year.
So it was 2012.
Okay.
Yeah. And so right after this class, I go to chapel. And in chapel, they have like this big band, right? And it's like all these super talented singers, and it's really cool. Like, the music's amazing, but I'm used to like raw, like house prayer. Like, we're playing off key and we're singing off tune, but like we really love Jesus. Like, it's raw, you know.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking at this band, and my super Christian hat comes on, and I think like, man, they're just showing off. Like, they're not even worshiping, because I look around the room and like nobody's like worshiping in the sense that like there's not a bunch of hands up in the air, there's not people jumping up and down. Like, it's just everybody's kind of like, you know, engaging in like a different way that I wasn't really used to, because at our church it was like jump and clap and scream, you know, and that like wasn't happening. And so they might look at us and think
like, that's fake.
These people are totally faking it. Yeah. So I looked around and I was like, these people, like, nobody really loves Jesus at this school. Like, there's one guy with his hands up, and I'm like, that guy, we can be friends. And like for real. And so I remember sitting there and I was just watching, right? And I was like, ugh. And I was really being like a snob, like a Christian snob. Like, I know better. Like, these people,
I know your type.
You know. Yeah. And so I was sitting there having this internal dialogue and being like, nobody's worshiping. And then Holy Spirit was like, you aren't either. Like, you're sitting here judging everybody's hearts, and like, who told you that was your job?
Wow.
And I was like, what do you mean? Like, and he was like, yeah, like, who told you get to decide whether or not these people are worshiping? Yeah. Like, you have no idea. And I felt so much conviction, because in that moment, I was part of the problem. Like, I was not worshiping. I was sitting there judging. And so my superhero Christianity suddenly started to crumble in that moment.
Let me ask you this then. So how did all that, or those types of moments, come into play with your offense towards God?
Okay, yeah. So I really thought, so then I like, you know, I learned a little bit. I like humbled myself a little bit more. But at the same time, I still held on to this belief that that because I had lived so well, in my opinion, right? Like, I never did anything crazy. Like, even as a pastor's kid, and even like with the reputation of pastor's kids of being like really rebellious, and like
Right.
I was never that kid. Like I
Right.
was always like, you know, in church, in school, like I got good grades, I, you know, did
Yeah.
all the right things. And so somehow I felt like if I didn't get this really awesome testimony of like, and then I got shot, and like, you know, but then Jesus like saved me, and
Oh
so
my
now I'm
gosh.
okay. Like somehow I felt like, well, I don't have that story, but maybe my super clean, pristine life means that like I can show people what it looks like to never have to deal with any of that, like never really be touched by the brokenness of the world or something like that. And in this I had like all these stories, all these testimonies about like when people got it right, God turned everything around. And I felt like, well, I never got it wrong, so
it should be
things
right.
should always just be right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So then I think it wasn't even so much that I was offended at God himself, but like I had this idea about who God was that isn't real. Like that God that I was following doesn't exist.
Yes. So I think I can point out, without going into details just yet, because we want to save those for other episodes.
Yeah.
But I think I could point out an area where offense towards God happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't that things weren't playing out for you.
Yeah.
Because that's one thing.
Yeah.
Right? And I think all of us can say that, like, well, God's not for me because I don't have that job, or I'm not, I don't have this much money, or I don't have that, whatever it might be. But so again, it's not so much that things didn't play out for you, is that why are things playing out for them?
Yeah.
They're obviously, and I'm using this in this for the sake of conversation, they're obviously sinners. Like,
yeah,
they're so jacked up.
Yeah.
Why did they, I'm gonna use this word now, why did they find love in a relationship? And why did I not? Like, it should not play out for them. Does that make sense? So I think that's where I can see the offense happen. Now,
I like sat at people's weddings and thought like, why are they getting married? Like, I'm ready to get married, and I'm sitting here at the singles table with like the one bridesmaid that doesn't have a date. Like, you know what I mean? And they're over there like married. Like, and so yeah, in my heart I was like, that's not fair. Like, I didn't even date anyone. Like, I was in my mid-20s.
So it was like a mix of two
someone.
things.
Yeah.
It's the mix that not only am I deserving, they're not deserving.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it should happen to me.
Yeah. That idea of like, I've spent my whole life preparing for this life, for like the life that they're just getting. Like, they just have it. It's just happening for them. You know, like, it reminds me of that the parable that Jesus tells.
Yes.
Where like he says like people come to work on in the field, right, and they like agree to a certain amount of pay.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the guy shows up.
Yeah, some guy shows up at the end of the day, or two guys show up at the end of the day, and they get paid the same as the guys that got paid the full day. And the full day guys are like, hey, like, what's going on? And the master says, well, like, first of all, this is my field, so I can pay them what they want. What I want. I mean, like, I can pay them what I want. Second of all, you had already agreed to this. Like, you just, you know, so, but I felt like that. I felt like the two guys that were there all day. Like, I've been laboring in the hot sun, or even like
all day
for you to pay them.
I'm the reason why there's a ministry for you to come
to. Or even like the older brother of the prodigal son. Like, I've been here the entire time. I like never left, and you're throwing this guy a party when he's been living on the street, right? And like, how is that okay?
So the other parable that comes to mind, and I think after this you can tell us how did the Lord in the midst of this call you higher? But the parable that I'm thinking of now that you brought those up, is the one of where the master gives three guys 10, 5, and 1 talents. And when we read it, I don't know if it's the Western mentality that we have. We tend to make it about the three guys. But what I see is that what's actually going on is that the three guys had different perspective of who the master was. And I think for the most part, like you were saying at the beginning of this conversation, that's what you had. You had a completely wrong or a distorted perspective of who God was. And because of that, it was this, like, you held him to your standard. As to the God you created in your mind, rather than, I just need to know you, rather than who cares whether that person's deserving or not. I need to know who you are. And
Yeah.
does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because you fit your own mold, but that wasn't even a mold that God put on you.
Yeah,
right?
no,
Like,
yeah, God never told me to do those things. I just decided.
and it's not that they were wrong.
No,
like,
yeah, it was
no
like
regrets.
school. Like, you know, like nobody tells you how to be a good student, but you figure it out and like you do it and you get the good grades. And so I thought, oh, Christianity is like school. Like I figure out how to get the good grade and then I'm good. Like I am good. I'm an A+ Christian.
Right.
Like,
Because you were good at school.
yeah, so I was like, God equals like my report card. Like we could do that, but that's not real. Like
I'm curious.
Yeah.
I'm curious. Really curious. Because again, we've never had this conversation.
Yeah.
Did it ever cross your mind to like, I'm gonna cross boundaries that I've never crossed? Let's say specifically in relationships or in a relationship. I'm gonna cross boundaries because it looks like it's going better for them when they do. Does that make sense? Like,
no, I get what
I'm
you're
gonna
saying.
cross the boundaries that
Like-
I've placed, or
Like forget it. Like they're doing it. Like it's happening for them, and they're not like.
yes. Like, did it ever cross your
As
mind to
restricted
think
as me?
like? Does that make sense? Like,
No, I mean yes, and I think people tried to convince me of that. Like friends tried to convince me, like, dude, it's not that serious, you know. But I really felt it was like legalism. Like I really felt like no. Like I need to keep my boundaries here because something really, really, really good will come out of it. Like it has to be like almost like. It's been so long, like I've kept this up for so long that if I throw it away now, I'm missing out like my bonus points or whatever it is. Like I'm throwing it all away. Like it's not like,
right.
you know, it's not gonna be worth it anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't really think about breaking boundaries because
I was
I'm
just
such
curious
I'm such
about
a square.
that, if that ever happened.
Like,
you know, like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
because you could see your friends, your sister, or other people, you'd be like,
Yeah.
just screw it. I'm just gonna go for
No,
this.
I really thought that like
I'm gonna flesh it out.
that it was like the longer I keep this going, the better the bonus will be. Like I
Okay.
really thought that.
Are you still keeping it going?
No.
So you've crossed boundaries.
We can talk about that some other time.
All right, maybe off camera. But let me ask you this now. Okay.
Yeah.
That's funny. Again, because
We've never talked about this.
yeah, and whether or not I thought of ever asking you, now I get the chance to.
Yeah, one time you contributed to bursting my bubble because we had a conversation. I was like leading under you, and I was in school and I still thought that I knew everything back in college. And we were talking about youth ministry, and I said something to you, and like after the meeting, you said something like, "Hey, like that was really condescending," and I was like, "Condescending me?" You know?
You remember what it was?
I don't remember. I just remember that I made some type of comment, or like I explained something to you, but instead of being like graceful, I explained it to you as if you were a child, you know? And I think you were like, dude, like, you don't call me dude. That's like my paraphrase. But you were like, that was really condescending. And I felt like, how dare me condescending to you, you know? But it also contributed to like bursting my bubble that like, I actually wasn't a super Christian. Like I didn't look anything like Jesus.
Right.
But I thought that I was like doing it right. I thought that I was leading well or like following Jesus well, but I really wasn't.
Wow. Okay. And so here it is. So you can wrap it up for us for this one, which you thought it was only going to be 10 minutes.
I did.
Because again, I know that we can't get into the full story on either story in these episodes,
Yeah.
but you said it was recent as up until like a couple years ago, right? What was one of the things that helped you indicate like, okay, now like I can't continue to choose to live like this? There's actually a realistic standard that God is calling me to that I can actually reach because of His grace or whatever, you know, fill in the blank. But what was a moment that happened that you realized like, no, I can't, like this, that would help us that are those that are listening, like, okay, maybe this is something I can point out right now that I need to stop before this gets worse. Does that make sense?
Yeah. The biggest wake-up call for me was failure. Like when all of my effort to make things really perfect and be like super Christian failed. Just like everything kind of blew up in my face. And my response to that was, first of all, I tried to be really strong. I tried to pretend like it really wasn't bothering me and like I was okay. because I thought that was like the next super Christian thing to do. Like, you know, God is good, everything's fine. Like, you know, like I'm gonna be fine. This is not that big of a deal. But then, like, just like things still weren't working out. Like, no matter what I did, no matter what, like I couldn't fix it. There was nowhere to fix it. There was nowhere to like make myself look good.
Yeah.
You know, it was just like I failed miserably. Like, this has completely failed. And so I was really, really angry with God because I felt like I remember it was right around the time that Elevation song I think came out. The like all your promises, like the what's that song? The Promises song, not the All Your Promises Are Yes and Amen. The other one, the I've seen you move the mountains.
Oh yeah.
Okay, the whole the chorus of that, like your promise still stands, great is your faithfulness.
Yes.
I was like, BS. I was like, no, I was like, it does not still stand. Like, I heard promises because I had like prophetic words released over my life.
Wow.
And then in the same day, the areas that I received prophetic words about all failed.
I asked you, like, what was the moment where you realized, okay, I can't continue living this way.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you this last question.
Yeah.
So in the midst of you failing epically, like I failed epic, and it like there's no way to like recuperate this on my own, right? And you realize I can't continue to do this in my own terms, in my own way, and think that things are going to turn out well because I'm doing A, B, and C, or I fit the mold.
Yeah.
What to help us now? What would be like? What was the transition moment where you realized like I'm just gonna lay this down, or how did that come into play for you?
I went to a night watch set.
Yes.
Because all my friends are in the house of prayer, not because I wanted to talk to Jesus, because I was mad at him. And I remember, so worship has always like really, really spoken to me, like singing songs. Like Laura Hackett says, like sometimes you have to sing your way into the truth.
Yes.
And that's been so real for my life. So that night,
things turned out, but going.
I even whatever, whoever it is.
Go.
Sing your way into the truth. So that night I went more because I was helping my friends who are staff in the house of prayer, and I was like, I don't want to talk to you, Jesus. Don't speak to me. Like, we're not talking right now. Like, you and me, we're on a break because I'm frustrated with you and nothing that I'm doing is working, and so I don't want to hear from you. But I was sitting there in like, you know, the prayer room, and the worship leader started singing that song, that the I am yours, yes I am, only yours, right? And then the bridge of that song says, you are my first love, you are my only one, like there is nothing else for me. And it says, where else can I go? You have my heart alone. You are the only home I need. And so I remember that I was listening, and I'm a worshiper, so like I wanted to sing, but I was like, no, like I was angry. And I remember that in that moment when they were singing like, where else can I go, that the Lord was like, I like literally felt Holy Spirit say like, you can be mad at me all you want, but where are you gonna go? Because he was like, you and I both know you're never gonna make it in the world. Like you can't do it. Like you and I both know you were made to be here. You don't even know what that looks like. Yeah, like you were made to be here. You wouldn't even enjoy it. Right. And so he was like, you and I both know this is your home. And so you can be mad at me as long as you want, but we both know you're not going anywhere. Wow. And
that's huge.
Yeah. And I sat there and I started crying because I knew that the Lord knew my heart, and that my bad concept of him hadn't offended him, and all the ways that I had accused him didn't offend him. And I wasn't disqualified, and he hadn't like released my calling to somebody else. Like he was saving my seat at the table for when I was done being mad. Wow. Yeah.
That's amazing. I've never even heard that.
Yeah.
That's awesome too. Yeah. I'm glad we're having this conversation.
Yeah.
So,
me too.
Man.
Yeah.
What would be the best way to end this?
So, I mean, my takeaway is sing your way into the truth. Like,
even when it's hard.
Even when it's hard.
But I think what you brought up at that last moment is like that transition moment. That's a huge transition moment.
Yeah.
Where if we're honest, like it's not gonna get better apart from me.
Yeah.
It's like John 15:5, that apart from me, you can do nothing.
Maybe we just...
But I want to know if that's gonna be in the shot.
Oh, what? I don't know how to do that.
Not in front of it? Yeah. Oh, yes.